rage, stay in your lane, turn the page, but something woke up deep inside, a stronger voice, a wilder ride. I've paid my dues, I know my worth, I've fallen down, I've had rebirth. Now I'm standing in my truth, not chasing time, I'm choosing me. I've got wisdom in my bones, fire in my soul. This isn't the ending, this is the moment I take control. Life gets better after 40, clearer vision, brighter glow. I'm not fading, I'm ascending. This is the best I've ever known. Stronger, bolder, unapologetic. I'm just getting started, don't you see? 40's forward, this is my time. The future's finally looking like me.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of 40s Forward. You guys are in for a treat because today I have Barbara Joshua. So Barbara is a senior business. I know you're going to be not looking at the computer when I say this, but because she's got a lot of amazing things about her, and I want to make sure I get everything. But she is a senior business consultant with 30 years of experience advising CEOs, CFOs, and executive teams on growth, transformation, and strategic realignment. She built her financial skills foundation at KPMG Consulting and later became partner at Contrast Management Consulting, guiding leaders through complex performance and change initiatives. As founder of Joshua Consulting GmbH and CFO of Up and Change, Barbara combines financial rigor with the clear belief that sustainable success requires a strong, people-centered leadership and culture. She's known as a sharp, trusted sparring partner who brings clarity to critical decisions and turns executive intent into organizational-wide momentum and measurable results, inspiring business results. So I'm very excited to have Barbara here with us today.
Thank you so much.
Taking the time. So, one of the things I was just talking about before we turned this on was that for people ages 40s and up, a lot of us are either hitting the peaks of our business, like right around now, or we're hitting that time where we're just like, oh my God, like maybe the business I started in isn't the one I want to, and then we're reinventing ourselves. So, what have you found with that, and what kind of advice can you give to people in the business world with that?
First of all, I love the 40 plus because I'm 55, so I'm a bit above that range already. But no, it's definitely the first part, hitting the peak. Probably because I was very lucky, in business consulting, you always have new environments and new people you're working with and new problems you have to solve. So it's not the typical company job where you always do the same over and over again. So I was lucky with that. I'm definitely hitting the peak, but I think there's still a little bit more to come and I'm working on that.
I love it. I love it. So what kind of things do you really focus on when you're consulting with in the business world?
Mm-hmm. Well, from Joshua Consulting, coming from this typical financial and performance advisor role, it's like big planning and reporting projects or big mergers where you have to transform the organization and stuff like that. So I will do a lot of program managing in that area. But if I want to make it very basic, it's everything to do with numbers, plus a lot of heart put into it. And that's sort of my business concept behind that, because you have the big consulting companies. So the question is always, why do they need me? I think I just have that people's approach. I make it possible for the people and to see that it's not sort of this terrible external consultant coming in to tell them what to do best. So, and I love doing that. So I had so many business transformations on that in that part. But I also do business sparring for single solopreneurs, because I don't think that you have to make the same mistakes twice. So if I can give them my advice, that's great too.
And what do you think, what is the most important skill in today's business world?
Okay. I think the most, and this is also the reason why I co-founded Up and Change with Dr. Gabriele Lang, because she, coming from an executive coaching perspective and me coming sort of from this financials, we realized there's one thing that's always the same, and that means collaboration in teams and in organizations, if that really works well, then you can innovate. And of course, diversity is nice, but it's a bit tricky, not having this people that tick in the same way like you sort of work throughout the day. And I think one of these main skills is how do I collaborate effectively with people if they don't agree with me? If I have to work with them, but I don't really like them, if they are, elbow people trying to sort of elbow their way up, and then they don't want to work on the actual cause, but they're just thinking about their career. And I think this is one of the main things that you have to actually work on to really be good.
It's funny because I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, like, as a health and wellness person, there's actually kind of a lot of, there's a lot of things that kind of connect with health and wellness and business and relationships, and even with sex. It's like almost like the same. It's like we could be almost interchanging these the conversation with any of those topics.
And that's why I love watching your podcast, because you have this holistic approach. And I always say to the people, if you're a person, why do you forget finances just because that's not your field? If you're at home and you don't have money, you don't go on to a vacation twice a year. You'll sort of save up money to do that. And it's the same in a business environment. So, and the same, of course, with health. And health has a lot to do with the way you interact with people as well. So personal skills, social skills in interaction, and creative skills are really, really important nowadays. And it's also something, sorry.
No, go ahead.
If I can just add this, the World Economic Forum always, brings, what are the sort of skills of the next, in the next 5 years that everybody has to have. And they will always say digital and AI skills on the one side, and then they've got these human skills, and that's solving complex problems, being empathetic, and not being a terrible person all the time, not always pushing people down, enabling and empowering. And I think this is so valuable because that's the only way forward. And I'm sure everybody that's listening has this one person where they think, they're really cool. They're humble. They know what they're talking about, but they are such a nice person and they really help people. And that doesn't mean you are weak or something, or you're trying to be only a people pleaser. People are really tough in their factual decisions, but the way they bring it across and the way they empower the people is so important.
It's something, as a business owner myself, I find that I get hung up with, I know what I'm thinking and I know how to do it. And there's sometimes the communication is a problem. And I find that very challenging because sometimes I know I shouldn't do this. I go, well, it's just easier for me to do it myself. And I'm sure you come across people, especially entrepreneurs, solo entrepreneurs that do that. But,
yes.
What advice would you have when it comes to like trying to communicate what I want to get done to a team?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, maybe two things. I mean, they always say the last person on earth that really knew all the sort of general knowledge really was Albert Schweitzer. And I mean, that's ages back, So I think it's really important for leaders to understand that you cannot be the best person in every area. And just because you're the owner and you think you know best doesn't mean that you are the best. So that's especially, with new techniques and things that you don't work with normally. Just get the advice. You have to still decide, and nobody's going to take the decision from you, but you don't have to do everything. So it's really empowering if you work in a team and you can give it to people. First of all, you see how they grow. And I love doing that. I love seeing people grow even beyond me. I have so many of my ex-employees that are now CFOs and CEOs, and it's so cool. I think, oh, yes, you're doing a good job, so that sort of works. That's the one part. And then just to see how rewarding it is when they bring ideas to the table. And I suppose it has to do with strategic planning. We as owners, business owners, we're constantly working, weekends and so on. But if you plan ahead a bit and you say, okay, I have a conference in 2 weeks, I need this and this, let me just give it to my employee and see what they come up with. And I tell them, do it. Bring an idea, bring it back to me, and then we go through it. And most of the time, first of all, they have other ideas than I'd never had. Sometimes I have to jump in because I'm not happy with it, but that's also okay. But if it's only once in a while, it's okay. So I would really test it with little tasks.
I like that.
Definitely helps.
If you give yourself enough time, if it's not done the way you want, you can always have time to fix it.
That is the problem. It always comes down to you. My brother always says, he's an IT expert. He says the problem sits 30 centimeters in front of the screen. I said, thank you very much. But he's right. If you plan ahead and you have enough circles how to do that, the next time round you will say, okay, you remember that presentation? I want something similar to that with that effect. And off they go and they work on it. So I think that's really great. You can, it is so rewarding for the people, but also for yourself, because then you can give things that you don't like doing. I mean, I don't like doing bookkeeping at all. I love it that my employee does it.
Yeah.
I'll check it, and sometimes I find stuff, but it's not something that I really am passionate about.
I see this thing too with one of the offices I work in that I don't own, but there's a manager and she's amazing, and she's getting frustrated all the time because she's telling the workers what to do, and it's not getting done. And I go, maybe it's the way it's being communicated. Because I know they say like the definition of insanity is just repeating the same thing over and over again. So if we're repeating the same instructions, but it's very difficult sometimes to like figure out how do I need to communicate these things so that they're getting done on the other end.
Yes, and there are certain things. I always say the goals must be clear and they must come from an owner. So if, for example, let's say excellent quality, let's take this office manager. You say excellent quality is what she expects, If you then sit down with the people and you say, look, my expectations of excellent quality, let me just see what you understand about excellent quality, and you get it together. Then you define the goals, and if you're really on one page with that, it's much easier for them to understand why it's so important, for example, I don't know, to greet somebody when they come into the office space or to clean up every two hours or so on. So one must trust, who was it? I mean, Steve Jobs wasn't an easy leader, but he always said, why do I hire the most expensive experts and then I tell them how to do it? And it's right.
I think a lot of people probably feel like that in their business.
And I mean, you've got employees and they are grown-ups and they know what they're talking about. And some of them have worked in the field forever. Just ask them how they want to do it. If there's very specific things that you say, okay, look, brand name, you must use in a certain way, that's okay. But you don't have to define how they have to breathe, how they have to change the coffee machine or whatever, because that's ridiculous. And you're too expensive as a resource to do that. So that's...
I almost see the same problem being a mother and a mother of teenagers. I almost see the same problem because here I am and I almost get as frustrated with them as I do sometimes the team, because I come home and I'm going, well, I asked you guys to clean this. Like, why do I have to say something more than once? And that happens in offices too. Like, why do I have to say something more than once? But then I realized it was my idea of cleaning and their idea of cleaning was a different thing. And it took like literally 6 months to try to figure that out, of arguing. And then finally one of my daughters was like, what exactly do you want us to do?
No, well, I've got 2 teenage sons. So then one is actually, he's going to turn 20, but it's the same. He said to me, Mommy, how can you see when you walk from one room to the next that there's something lying? I said, and I gave up. I said, listen, when you live on your own for the first time, you will see what's going to happen, because we were the same. I left the stuff lying around until I got so fed up of the stuff lying around that I now just pick it up when I go past, So I think one should trust a bit more, also now after Corona, where the people had a lot of office, working from home office and so on. I mean, so what if they put the washing into the washing machine and they get up and do a little bit of sports, walking to and fro, hanging up the washing, and then they continue with their work? It's okay like that. So trust them. Yeah.
I love that. What would you say, do you have any career advice for especially women who are aspiring to be more?
Oh, where do I start? The first thing is, I think, believe that you can do it, because there's so many women that when they get asked, do you want to do a job? They say, no, I don't have the education. I must get that degree first. And no, I don't. And I mean, there are so many men, not everybody, but so many men that would say, yes, of course. And they don't have half of the skills that they need. So it's, if you want to, if career for you is something of going through the hierarchies of an organization, then you must trust that you do it, and then just try it out. Believe. And the most important thing is just hear what your gut instincts are telling you. If you don't feel well working in that team, if you feel they're going to pull the wool over your eyes, then don't do it. Don't. The second thing is, if you work for something, you also present it. You don't have to be pushy. As I said, if it's a team effort, you always let the team present something. But if it was your work and your colleagues goes and jumps up and says, yes, I can present it in the next team meeting, it's not such a good idea. And then just be curious. Just find out what really gives you that passion, because I believe, it's so funny. My brother-in-law, he plays in the Viennese Symphonic Orchestra. Okay. And he said to me once, and he's right about that. He said, Barbara, you can have a lot of talent, but only when you're passionate about it, you will become excellent. You can't strive for excellence just from nothing. You have to really love what you're doing. And that I think is great. Yeah. Speak to as many people as possible. Be nice to everybody, to the janitor, to the CEO, to somebody walking across the street. You never know who they are.
I love that tip. Yeah. That is one of my favorite, because I do see that sometimes. Like, there's an organization that I've been going to their conference for years, and there's always the same people that are working behind the scenes. And I always make sure I'm saying hi to them because I see them every year, and other people ignore them because they're not like one of the main speakers. But let me tell you, every year they're super friendly to me, and God forbid I actually need something, they're the ones that rush to my, to help me out.
Definitely. It's always a give and take. And it was like, I still remember when I did my first student job, it was at the Chamber of Commerce here in Vienna. And I walked across the road from the tram line, and this old gentleman said, oh, you're coming to the Chamber of Commerce? I said, yes, I'm starting my, like an intern job for summer. And he said, oh, interesting. I didn't realize it was the president of this whole thing. He knew the name of every single employee there. It was incredible. He would greet the biggest industrial boss in the same way as he would greet the cleaners. And, I believe, like manners and being nice and saying yes and please and thank you without being, submissive in a way. It's something money can't buy. The people remember that. They remember that you're nice to them. And they will call you and say, I've got a question. Can we do that? And of course, if they're nice to me, I will be nice to them as well.
I know, even when I know the guy who fills my gas in my car, Fred.
Exactly.
I always talk to him, and finally I was like, I hate talking to somebody not knowing their name. And I'm like, by the way, I'm always stopping here and getting my gas. Like, what is your name? And so now I say hi to Fred every time I go get my gas, and he talks back. I'm like, listen, everybody's people. Like, you got to be nice to people, because you never know what someone's situation is or what their story is.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And I mean, what experiences they had in their life, because some of them, he likes doing that, but maybe he was a technician somewhere else and he just didn't want to do that job anymore. It's like, I don't assume something because of the way somebody looks like, or which hierarchy they are, or if they're quiet or loud. That's also one of my favorites. You have these typical people that jump into a room and they're always in the middle of everywhere. And then you've got the quiet ones, and they say one sentence, and uh-oh, I forgot that. Or, oh, that's a valid argument. Crap, I didn't think about that. So I think, just being a bit humble towards circumstances and people, I think, is a good technique.
Now, I know you say that you help businesses with like complexities. What would be an example of that?
Okay, so for example, one of the biggest projects I ever did was we have the Austrian Railway Company, and they have one of the companies is the infrastructure company, and there were used to be two separate public companies, and they were merged. Now you can imagine what that means for 18,000 people, because they have 18,000 people in that company. You had to go through all the processes of these two companies, see where you have redundancies, see where we can actually be more effective. You had to look at the performance system. You had to look at the way the inner workings are, the management directives. So that was a lot of paperwork, and there take the complexity out of it, but still make it happen as one new thing. That's what we did, for example. It was a project for 3.5 years. So that had legal implications, it had accounting implications, it had HR implications, it had new functions that were supposed to be defined, and so on and so on. So a lot of complex system, but still to this day, the processes still work in that way. I find that amazing. And this is now a long time ago already.
That is amazing. How do people, like, when they're looking at their businesses, or if they're a manager or if they're a business owner, how do they basically, I know this is probably a giant question that's not easy to answer, but how would they look or start to even look at where they would need to kind of fix or streamline some of those complexities? Is there anything that's like kind of a big show that says like, all right, you know what, now we gotta organize a little bit better?
Okay, well, if you maybe two or three things. The first thing is if you have a huge org chart, which is totally complex, and you've got lots and lots of little boxes. You used to do that to give everybody a responsibility, but mostly that's an overkill. I just have to look at the org chart and I know already what's happening most of the times. The second thing is, of course, just looking at the P&L and the balance sheet and stuff like that. If I look through it, especially, from year to year, how it's developed, I can see where there are sort of blind spots. Of course, you won't know. We won't be able to do that just when you come directly from the university, but you get to know that. And the actual third part is, if you cannot explain to somebody who's not from the field what the goal of the company is, what the main strategies are, and what your path is going to look like, because it's very difficult to simplify something like that. Only if you can tell what you're doing in 2 or 3 sentences are you really at the peak of your leadership. Okay, so if they've got tons of PowerPoints and it's a lot of blah blah, and you think to yourself, okay, I don't even know what this company is doing or what's happening in the competitive, then I know it's too complex.
That's also important, because if those businesses are trying to get clients and the clients can't, if the business themselves can't figure out like how to say it very easily, the clients are not going to understand, because they always say like a confused mind doesn't buy. And
yes,
I have a really good friend. She has a company that is this health. See, I don't even know how to explain it. It's some kind of health platform, but it's so complex, and I've signed up to be on it. And I know hopefully she doesn't listen to this. I haven't done anything with it because I still don't really totally understand what it does.
But you see, we always talk about if you, for example, do a business plan, we talk about the Soviet, like if you ever have a napkin planning. Okay, you must be able to write your main figures on a napkin. If you can't do that, if you can't explain what the value, for example, of this platform is, or what kind of products you have, or what kind of business model, in principle, you don't have to have all the details, then it's probably too complex.
I know. I think sometimes a lot of us like to make things bigger and more complex when it's really the simplest plans that probably end up doing the best.
No, and You have great ideas. You have people that have great ideas. Okay, you start off with a product. Oh, yes, I could have a platform, and there I could have a marketing thing on there. Oh, yes, and then I could give trainings, and then I could do it on site, and I could do it digitally. And it just explodes instead of saying, okay, if I look at my clients, the biggest problem is A, B, and I want to address that first. And everything else sort of comes along. It probably in a midterm sort of scenario, you'll develop more if you want to grow more, but sort of concentrate on that because that's where you're good at.
Yeah, that's actually, because that's where I am right now, because I'm building this new practice and I'm making a platform and I'm making like a whole online like library. And I'm like, you know what? That's a good advice because I'm like, maybe people don't really want all that, but I have this like great thing that keeps expanding and then I never get anything done.
But you know what my tip is there for small companies or for people that want to grow that is have a huge board in your office somewhere. And every time you have a idea like that, take a post-it with different colors and put it on there. So that you have your core and the core is really sturdy and you know exactly what you want to do. And then you've got these. And then you sit down at the beginning of the year and you think to yourself, okay, this year in the third quarter, I want to manage A. But that doesn't mean your ideas go away. You just put them on the board. They're not gone. But they are not cluttering your mind like that because you cannot concentrate on everything at once.
My husband always likes to point out because he knows I tend to get myself involved in like multiple projects all at once. And he's like, listen, all the good entrepreneurs, he goes, they do one thing and they get one thing started really well. He's like, then they move to the next thing. He goes, they don't have 20 things done half-assed. He's like, they get one thing done really well.
But that's the thing. That's the beauty where you work with different teams, and that's what we do at Up and Change. We have a tool called the Inner Sparker, and this is like, where are your blind spots to be creative? And you need people like yourself that are fantastic with ideas, and they can just bubble over with ideas all over the show. But then you also need people to follow through with that, and you need other people that keep you on track and say, whoa, we don't have that kind of money at the moment. We have to sort of downsize it at the moment. So it's really important for development phases like that to have different personalities on board in your team, to not let it sort of go overboard in one or the other directions.
When it comes to leadership, what are the skills that you think that we need, like for every day? Like, what's your everyday go-to?
It's always been my main thing is empathy. I think you need to be empathetic. And as I said, it's not being cozy. Yeah, because I'm very strict in the factual part. But if you don't like working with people, it will not work. Okay. And always, don't take it personally. Most of the time when the people react, it's because they had a fight with their mother-in-law, or the dog sort of peed in the front yard, or whatever. It has nothing to do with you, but we always project it on ourselves.
I do all the time.
Breathe. I always told my young consultants, which I had at KPMG, I said, guys, think of the boss in a little, in the boxer shorts with lots of hearts on it, and they already started laughing. I said, it has nothing to do with you, Just imagine if there are consultants coming on board, telling a CEO what to do, That's crazy. That is really crazy. Don't take it personally.
I'm laughing because I have an e-commerce store and I literally had a chargeback yesterday where when someone initiates a chargeback, that creates a lot of fees for me. Like, they just could have said like, oh, we changed our mind, we would have refunded the order. But because I initiated this chargeback, so I took it personally. I was like, oh my God, why did they do this? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you know what? They just did because they changed their mind and they couldn't figure out how to get a refund. They just went the way that they knew. And I know it had nothing to do with me, but like all last night I was like, why'd they do this? And now I'm like, yeah.
Then probably you're angry with yourself because you should communicate that you have both possibilities.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's definitely being empathetic. Leadership always includes a strategic vision. And one thing which is really important for me is that if you have an opinion, say it, even if nobody in the room says it. Why? I that's probably when you get older. You sort of I cherish people that where I know exactly that they say what they mean, and not try to sort of whitewash stuff and make it sound politically correct and blah blah blah, because I can't work with that. I can work if somebody tells me, Barbara, I don't like you because I don't like this opinion. I can live with that. But if somebody says, yes, sure, Mrs. Joshua, no problem, I feel as if they are, not being very nice and not being very sincere. So I think sincerity and sticking to an opinion and having an opinion is really important.
I find that sometimes for other people, it's hard for them to, like, they're almost trying to find out what you want to hear. And they're trying to answer you with like, well, what is the right answer? Like, does the other person want to hear? And you're right, it doesn't work. Like, it's better to be sincere and just be like honest, because it's a lot easier to deal with.
Yes, but I accept that there are people that also need to air different kinds of views. It's like I'm sort of we have at Up and Change we have different stress typologies, and I'm a tiger in the stress typology, which is not always good, But as I said, a tiger is very sort of goal orientated. But I accept that some people just don't like this going for the goal immediately. They need to sort of talk about it and take everybody on board. Does it stress me sometimes? Yes, but I have to accept it. That's the beauty of diversity, also in stress typologies.
I like that. And the same thing with like different learning types. Like, some people learn differently. Like, I am very visual. So if you tell me to do something, it's like in one ear, out the other. Like, I have to write it down. I have to see it. I have to visualize it. Otherwise, it's not happening and I'm not going to remember it.
No, I agree totally. My youngest son is like that. He always says, Mommy, with a maths example. I said, bring the book to me. Let me look at it. I need to look at it. Why? I just told you. I said, well, I need to look at it. If his father tells him now, Mommy's told you 1,000,000 times. She needs to see it in front of herself to be able to add her opinion to it. Yeah.
I mean, same thing with like my kids are always asking like, oh, can we go do this thing or can we go do that thing? I'm like, we have a family calendar now. I'm like, put it on the calendar. If I can see it, then I can see how it fits in with my calendar, and then I can give you a yes or no. Like, just because it's on the calendar doesn't mean like it's a yes, but if you put it, it'll save the spot. And then so like that's one of the, and I've actually started to try to do that with my team, because they'll be like, this thing is coming up or that thing, put it on the calendar, like, so I can see it, and then we can then accept it or. So.
No, but I agree totally. I find it hilarious because my eldest son, he came the last time, he said, Mommy, where's your list? I said, I didn't write a list for you. You're going to be 20. Mom, you have to write me a list. And I thought to myself, yes, got it. I got them to write lists.
Oh, my goodness. And just in wrapping up now, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think is really important for us to know?
I believe nowadays, because you asked about, women coming into certain areas and you're sort of developing. Nowadays, everything is possible. Don't restrict yourself with saying, probably this won't work and probably that. The self-restriction I find very intimidating. A lot of women do that. Don't do that. And what else could I ask? No, I think you've sort of covered the most important ones.
And it's important. I don't want to like pick on the men and like just focus on the women, but like there's a difference in how people are socialized, and there's even the hormones are neurotransmitters. So men having more testosterone are going to naturally, and this is a generalization, I know there's somebody who's going to attack me on this, but as a generalization, they tend to be more confident. So they tend to be in business a little bit more, they tend to be more assertive. They tend to be more confident. Of course, there's different personalities. women don't have as much testosterone. So just based on biology, they may not be like as confident. And then there's the socialization that I see. And even I see this with my kids who are teenagers. It's this whole idea of being polite and not being too loud. And like I have to tell my teenage girls, like, you don't have to, be asked permission to talk. Like, you need to get more aggressive. You got to practice that so that by the time you're in a business situation, you be confident in what you have to say. Like, your opinions are just as valid as anybody else's. You need to speak up.
Yeah. No, and I think that's an important aspect that you brought. It's also the way your parents were towards you. If your parents sort of had, girls be quiet and don't say anything, and you now have children or nieces or whatever, just let them speak. Get them into conversations. I mean, my youngest drives me completely crazy because he's totally into history. He's constantly asking me now with the new war and whatever. He's like, Mommy, what's happening here? And what's happening there? And on the one side, I'm very proud because he's active with that. But it's the same with my niece. My niece is also, she's studying criminal psychology. I mean, this is really off the charts, but she's going to be great. And maybe one thing where we shouldn't paint the picture bleaker than it is, because what women have, most of the women, are very reflective. And being reflective and reflecting on your own actions and what's happening around you, that has its nurturing aspect without being motherhood, but it is nurturing for a team that is so valuable. I mean, of course, there are other women as well, but I mean, most of the women work for the cause and not for their career. And that is extremely valuable. Take it on board. See that you have mixed teams, see that you have diverse teams in every aspect there is of diversity, and I'm sure it's going to work out well for the business.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. Where can people find more information about you?
Yes, well, I'm on LinkedIn. So if you put in Barbara Joshua, then there are not a lot of Barbara Joshuas in Vienna. So please do so. Or you can also find me on Instagram. I've got the homepage for Joshua Consulting and also for Up and Change. So anytime there, just reach out. I'll get back to you, and I would love to have a few conversations on this topic. And I must really thank you, because I think you have such a positive outlook on 40 plus women, which not a lot have. So I think that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. And I will tell you guys, definitely follow her, especially on LinkedIn. Like, your posts are amazing. I love them. Good. So they've been very educational for me. And follow her on all the other platforms. And lastly, make sure you guys stick around, follow us, and come back for more 40s Forward.
Life gets better after 40, clearer, vision brighter glow. I'm not fading, I'm ascending. This is the best I've ever known. Stronger, bolder, unapologetic. I'm just getting started, don't you see? 40s forward, this is my time. The future's finally looking like me. We got wisdom, we got fire, we got nothing left to prove. This is power, this is freedom, this is living fully you. Life gets better after 40. This is where I rise and shine. 40's forward, full of purpose. I'm stepping into my